Hello everyone, I'm Dylan. This is Dylan's DIY Workshop, and today we're going to be making a bike rack that you can hang all of your bikes on in your garage. So to start off here, I've got a little layout of the different lengths that you'll need to cut out of the different length pieces. You can make this whole thing out of two 2x4 10-foot pieces and one 2x4 14, as well as two long bolts with two washers on each and then one nut on each. So total, you can make this entire project with under $20 worth of materials. So you can go on over to your nearest home center or hardware store, lumber yard, wherever you can buy all these materials, and you should be able to get it for cheaper than that. Now, some lumber yards will cut the lumber to different lengths for you. That's what happens where I work. Also for a fee, so you're going to end up paying more for that, but you don't necessarily have to have all of the tools that I use here. I happen to use a miter saw and a bandsaw to make these cuts. You could make the angled cuts on using a circular saw or a jigsaw or even a hand saw, and you could also make the more advanced cut that I make on the bandsaw. You could make that with a jigsaw as well, or a scroll saw, or even a hand saw if you clamp the piece down right. So here I have a bunch of nothing, and I'm going to cut the video to, oh, never mind, I started working. What you're going to want to do here is mark out 17 degrees away from one corner, and then your 2x4 is 1.5 inches wide, so mark down 3/4 away from that line and then draw a parallel line. Kind of like the picture you see there drawn. That's the idea of the A-frame. You'll see that in a couple minutes after I'm done cutting it out, what it's actually going to look like. And once you have this piece and the opposite leg put together, it will cradle a 2x4 perfectly in the middle. Or, well, not so perfectly, but the idea is that you tighten up the bolt and it'll squeeze on the 2x4. So again, I said that I used a bandsaw in this. You don't have to use a bandsaw. You could use the jigsaw or a hand saw. I'd use a coping saw if this is what you're going to do. However, this is going to take a long time since you're sawing through a lot of material. So I would suggest using a power tool of some sort if you have that available. I'm also just using a sander quick there just to smooth out the edges of that cut. That's not necessary. I didn't actually do it for the other pieces, so keep that in mind. It was just an extra step that I left in there. Now the next thing that I do here is basically just trace the first one onto the next ones because they're going to be the exact same. Now I'm making sure to just use the same one as a template rather than cutting one out and using it for the next, because you want it to be the exact same. So just use the same piece as the template for the rest. So that's what the cut looks like. It basically looks exactly like the picture I already showed you guys. The next thing you want to do is cut the bottom of the leg so that it is going to sit flat on the floor once your two pieces are together at the top. Now to figure out what angle you need for the leg, you just use complementary angles, and you'd know that you use 17 at the top, so that would make the angle of the leg at the bottom 73 degrees. So I just marked that from the same edge that I marked the 17 from, and then I drew the line across. Now that I have that line drawn right across there and then hatched out the part that I'm going to cut off so that I don't forget, obviously, because you want to measure twice, cut once idea. What I do is I take it over to the miter saw and I set up the miter saw to that line. I don't use the gauge or dials on the miter saw because that's not as accurate as the measurement that I just put down on the piece of wood, because tons of people use this saw. If you have a more accurate one, you could probably just set your saw to that either 17 degrees or 73, whichever one the saw would line up to, and be the right cut and then not be the opposite. So I did this to all four of the legs, and I just kind of trimmed it up because it didn't quite fit the first time. There will be a little bit of troubleshooting no matter what kind of project you do. Nothing's as straightforward as it seems, and even I mess up a whole bunch of times, believe it or not. So this is what it's supposed to look like, each leg, and then your 2x4 is going to sit in the top like this. Now, I didn't explain how to make this cross brace, or I didn't make it part of the video. Actually, I guess I did. What you're going to want to do is keep the same angle that you just did for the bottom of the leg, keep that on your saw, and just cut a piece at any length as long as it's shorter than the widest part of your legs, width-wise. As long as it's shorter than that, just cut the same angle on both sides and slide it up in between the legs until it touches both sides. Next, you're going to want to drill 2 holes, basically a pocket hole. You don't actually have to have a pocket hole, a jig to make a pocket hole. All you need to do is put the drill in and then slowly put it down on an angle until it works. Now, it's not going to be quite as nice as a pocket hole, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult, but you don't need a jig to do this. Just drill out that hole, use the screws, put it together. Now it's not going to be completely tight at the top, and that's where this next step comes in. So you're going to want to make sure you clamp this down for this part, because you can't really use a drill press and you're going to have to use a hand drill, and it's quite a big bit and you're going through a lot of material. And if your bit is not sharp, kind of like the one I used, it's going to take a lot of energy to push this through. So take your time, let it spin, yada yada yada. Don't hurt yourself, don't get too frustrated. I know that I did, because this, I think, took me probably like 20 minutes to drill the hole through this piece and the hole through the other piece. Now, it took me a while to figure this next one out, but basically what I did is take a big Forstner bit, something that's bigger than the washers that I'm using. I think it was a 1-inch Forstner bit, and what I did was I made a recess. If you have long enough bolts, you're not going to need to do this. However, the bolts I had weren't long enough, so I needed to make the faces of the wood a little bit closer together. So I just inset it with the Forstner bit, and then the washers would still both fit on either side, and that was how I put it together. So here I'm finally trying to assemble it, see if it works, now that I've got at least one of the bolts through, and it looks pretty good to me. I'm just going to do a little walk around here, because I thought that would be a good idea, and point to all the different parts of it. Okay, so got this done. It's 9 feet long. It's, I'd say, about 40 something inches high. Doesn't need to be exact, it's gonna hold bikes. Anyways, the way that these are held together is by one bolt right here, and you just tighten that and it'll hold this like a clamp, and then you could just drive a screw in here and through here just to make it a bit stronger, but it shouldn't really be necessary as long as you can clamp that bolt down tight enough. These are fixed in place with screws. You could use pocket holes. I didn't. I just drilled a hole, kind of like a pocket hole, and then fastened it in with a deck screw. The idea of this is it's super simple. You can do it with anything that you've got, really, and it should cost you under 20 bucks. Same over here, just tighten it with that. And the idea is so that you can loosen this off and then store it somewhere flat and then bring it back out at the beginning of the season. That being said, like if you put the 2 screws in here, they're just to help hold it from rocking back and forth. So they're not necessary, but good idea. Also, you can add in like a little 45-degree cross piece right here with those 7.5-inch pieces that we still have left. All you need to do is cut a 45 and a 45. I'm not going to do that. The person that this is for doesn't really need it, I don't think. All they need to do is put the 2 screws in and it should be fine. Thank you for watching. This has been how to build a bike stand for less than $20. See ya. Actually, make sure that you comment on this video your thoughts and what you think I could have done better, or your experiences with building something like this. Thank you. Bye.